The reclaimed substation hums, a deep breath pushing through the raw power lines. Anansi's custom meters blink a kaleidoscope rhythm, mirroring dust motes dancing in the amber glow of a single tube amp. Kalen taps the antenna like it's a forgotten drum, while Lex's precise stamps echo faintly on some unseen form. Xeroxed zines and protest flyers spill from the faders, a paper forest of defiant thought.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
New York checks in at 91 degrees and clear. Airflow is northwest at about 7 miles per hour. The faint smell of hot vacuum tubes drifts across the console. First up, the tragic loss of a young life in Melbourne, a crack in the everyday architecture of community safety, challenging our collective sense of provenance and dignity.
Concrete facts: 15-year-old Darwish Mohammed died after allegedly being found with stab wounds outside a Craigieburn hospital in Melbourne. A 17-year-old has since been charged with murder, and initial reports suggest the incident may have occurred in Keysborough. This isn't an isolated event. Youth violence, particularly involving knives, has seen an uptick in parts of Melbourne, creating a pervasive undercurrent of fear. Who is affected? Primarily, Darwish's family and friends are plunged into unimaginable grief and trauma. Beyond them, the entire Melbourne community, especially parents and young people in Keysborough and Craigieburn, suffer a profound erosion of trust in public spaces and a heightened sense of vulnerability. This tragic incident also impacts the accused teen and their family, drawing them into a complex justice system and further strains community relations, particularly between different youth groups or demographics.
Hold that thread. Next signal. Algerians vote in parliamentary elections.
A viable alternative. Proactively fund and expand community-led youth mentorship programs, like the Street Architects Initiative in Dandenong, which connects at-risk teens with elders for skill building, conflict resolution, and cultural grounding. These programs must be designed by and for the communities they serve, fostering a sense of ownership and belonging that acts as a protective shield. Another alternative is investing heavily in accessible mental health services tailored for youth, addressing underlying trauma or disaffection before it escalates. Our immediate chosen next move is to amplify local efforts to establish safe passage zones around schools and community hubs. This means collaborative mapping of these routes with direct input from parents, students, and local community leaders in affected areas like Keysborough and Craigieburn. Simultaneously, we must push for immediate visible investment in these zones, not just policing, but improved lighting, community art installations, and visible community patrols, rebuilding the architecture of safety from the ground up.
This echoes ancient narratives where the village square, once a place of gathering and protection, becomes a TogeeVision.com of fracture. Who carries the collective memory of safety when the young are lost in such a way? An attack on one child is a wound across the entire civic body, a torn thread in the communal tapestry, demanding a reweaving of ancestral communal responsibility. It forces us to integrate the raw emotion of loss with the logic of structural intervention.
Patching in a caller, the skeptic. You're on the signal.
We hear about these programs, but what's the real cost of letting this violence fester versus investing heavily in prevention? Who pays the long-term emotional and economic price when a community feels unsafe? And how do we even begin to measure the ROI on safe passage zones against the immediate, reactive policing budget? It often feels like these alternatives are just band-aids on a gaping wound.
From that dossier to this one, no Israeli security without Palestinian freedom. No Palestinian. That's the core discernment, friend. We are weighing the cost of broken trust against the investment in structural integrity. The measure isn't just financial return, but the social capital preserved, the dignity upheld for every child navigating their daily architecture in places like Keysborough. The ROI is in the quiet moments of peace, the unstated confidence of parents, the thriving of young minds. This local fracture reflects a broader systemic challenge to self-determination, a failure to uphold the foundational consent of safety for its citizens. It's about building an inner architecture of security that isn't just external enforcement.
The gaping wound is the loss of consent to safety, to belonging. Our task is to restitch that consent with stronger threads, making the architecture resilient.
Moving to Algeria, where parliamentary elections reveal a complex struggle between state-defined legitimacy and the people's yearning for authentic representation, challenging the very provenance of civic power.
Concrete facts show that on June 12th, Algerians went to the polls for parliamentary elections. However, over 1,200 candidates, many of whom were independent and critical of the government, were disqualified before Election Day by the National Independent Election Authority, ANE. The official turnout was reported at just over 30%, significantly lower than previous elections, with many boycotting due to a perceived lack of genuine choice. Who is affected? The Algerian electorate is primarily affected, subjected to limited choices that largely favor candidates aligned with the existing power structure, further deepening political apathy and distrust in democratic processes. The disqualified candidates, many representing the Hirak protest movement's aspirations for change, are silenced and deprived of their right to participate, marginalizing dissenting voices. This also affects Algeria's international standing, raising questions about the fairness and legitimacy of its democratic institutions. A viable alternative: establish a truly independent electoral oversight body with robust international and local civil society participation, empowered to conduct transparent candidate vetting, monitor campaigns, and adjudicate disputes, free from state control. This body would ensure equitable access to media for all candidates and implement verifiable ballot tracking, building genuine public confidence. Our chosen next move is to track and archive the platforms and statements of these disqualified candidates, building a digital provenance of their civic intent and vision for Algeria, independent of state validation. This involves collaborating with digital archivists and human rights organizations to create an accessible, immutable record. Furthermore, we must support local initiatives that foster independent media and citizen journalism, turning confusion into actionable vectors by providing unfiltered information.
This situation mirrors the suppression of native tongues, where the official language attempts to silence a myriad of diverse local voices. The exclusion of hundreds of candidates is an architectural signal. It indicates who holds the blueprints for public discourse, rather than recognizing the structural integrity of genuine civic participation. Who carries the story of those unheard, those who wish to build a different civic structure? The myth of a unified, compliant populace is often a cover for fractured consent.
We've got someone. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
Mapping voices outside state control sounds good. But what's the evidence it actually shifts power? What concrete mechanism makes a digital town square on some mesh translate to tangible change in Algiers? It feels like vibes over verifiable action, ignoring the very real power dynamics at play.
That's a fair challenge to the blueprint, friend. The evidence isn't always in immediate grand-scale shifts, but in the slow, persistent build of provenance, a verifiable history of consent and self-organization. When we map these voices, we establish a record. This record becomes the structural leverage for future negotiations, for demanding recognition of autonomous civic architecture. It's not about overthrowing the existing system with a single blow, but about constructing an undeniable, resilient alternative from the ground up, bit by bit. It's about showing that the people are already self-governing in parallel, asserting their inherent self-worth beyond state validation. It integrates logic, the archive, and emotion, the yearning for voice.
The true power shift isn't just in seizing the existing levers, but in proving the old machine isn't the only one capable of moving mountains. You build a new engine.
Same dossier, new angle, keep the thread tight.
The concrete facts are that this statement, often attributed to figures like Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz, or Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, reflects the ongoing reality of an occupation impacting Palestinian daily life and Israeli security concerns from groups like Hamas. This dynamic is exacerbated by continued settlement expansion, demolitions and blockades on one side, and rocket attacks and militant actions on the other. Recent tensions in Jerusalem and Gaza, including clashes at Al-Aqsa and retaliatory strikes, serve as stark reminders of this cycle. Who is affected? Both Israeli and Palestinian populations are trapped in a cycle where each side's basic needs, security for Israelis, freedom and dignity for Palestinians, are perceived as an existential threat to the other. This affects daily life through checkpoints, military operations, economic hardship, and the constant psychological burden of conflict. It also impacts global geopolitics, drawing in regional and international actors, perpetuating a narrative of division and hindering broader stability. A viable alternative path involves implementing a multinational, UN-backed security guarantee for both sides, coupled with immediate, large-scale economic development projects in Palestinian territories, creating shared stakes in stability. This would include international peacekeepers, clear demilitarization agreements, and significant investment in infrastructure, education, and healthcare within a framework that respects self-determination for both peoples. A new Marshall Plan for the region, but with genuine equity and oversight. Our chosen next move is to meticulously document all instances of cross-community, non-governmental cooperation, like the Parents Circle, Families Forum, the Hand in Hand, Center for Jewish Arab Education in Israel, or Combatants for Peace, identifying and amplifying these micro-architectures of shared dignity and mutual aid. We must analyze their methodologies, track their impact, and provide resources to scale successful models, demonstrating that consent and provenance for a shared future are already being built from within.
This reminds me of two trees whose roots have grown so tangled, neither can truly thrive without the other, yet they constantly compete for the same soil and light. The lineage of this land is shared, from Abraham to the present. Who carries the memory of coexistence, of shared harvest and shared sorrow, when the dominant narrative is always one of conflict? We need to discern the ancient signals of interdependence, the deep structural commonalities that predate the current walls. Humor often emerges from this shared struggle, a signal of underlying humanity.
Callers on. Go ahead.
Documenting cooperation sounds nice, but doesn't it ignore the massive power imbalance? How do these micro-architectures realistically address the concrete walls and checkpoints, or the rockets and retaliations? It feels like we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic while the ship sinks, utterly failing to confront the structural realities.
That's the sharp discernment required, caller. We are not ignoring the walls, but rather identifying the gaps in the official architecture, where consent and dignity already find expression. These microstructures are not designed to replace the macro politics overnight, but to establish a provenance of shared humanity and mutual interest. They are the structural rebar in a foundation we are collectively rebuilding, demonstrating that shared security can be built from the ground up, not just imposed from the top down. It's about integrating the emotional truth of suffering with the logical necessity of collaboration, turning confusion into actionable vectors by showing how a different future is already being constructed. This is how resilient inner and civic architectures are forged.
That's bending the rules of engagement to reveal the true system architecture. The game isn't just played on the existing board. Sometimes you have to build a new one beneath it. These micro-architectures are the proof of concept for autonomy and dignity.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.